Thanks for joining me, everybody. Today, I've got my good friend Michael Drew with Book Retreat. I'm really excited to dig into this, Michael, because I am a very casual and okay writer, and I think that's okay by your what we were talking about before the show. That's a good thing. So give us a little bit of a quick intro to yourself, Michael, and Book Retreat and what you guys do.
Quick backstory. I'm a high school dropout, and that it's pretty public knowledge on that. I'm very upfront. And I went from being a high school dropout and a drug dealer, being homeless in Washington State, to coming back home where I'm from, which is Provo, Utah, and starting at a magazine that was a division of the Columbia Leadership Center, which then transitioned into my getting into book publishing with that agency. And then I got a huge job offer from legendary publisher Ray Bard of Bard Press fame. And I took the job, and the first day on the job, Ray Bard said to me, "Michael, we publish business authors. What our authors want more than anything else in the world is to be a New York Times bestseller. What I want you to do is figure out how the New York Times and other bestseller list works." So as a young, naive 19 and a half year old, I'm like, sure.
Yeah, I can do anything.
I don't know. I don't know to not know and not to ask. So you know what I did? I literally called the New York Times. I called the Wall Street Journal. I called Business. I called USA Today and said, "I'm Michael Drew at Bar Press. How does your list work? We'd like to market our books onto it." And they to one degree or another, they all laughed at me. But they also all, I think, appreciated my brazenness and willingness to ask. And they said, "Hey, just keep calling back, and we'll become friends." And so I did, and started getting little bits of data and information here and there. And the first book I worked on for Ray Bard was a book titled "Secret Formulas of the Wizard of Ads" by Roy H. Williams. And Roy owns the fourth largest ad agency in North America for buying radio. And he's actually a living legend in marketing and advertising today. And because of his relationships with the radio stations, the campaign that we developed was to send an advanced copy of the book to the general manager of every radio station in North America. This is back in '99, by the way, so it's been a number of years. We asked the stations to buy 20 books from either Amazon or Barnes & Noble, depending on the market they were in, and to run 200 radio ads the month that the book was launched. And in exchange, Roy would give them it was on VHS, a training system on how to use the book to sell radio. You see, Secret Formulas argued his belief, which is that radio is the best form of advertising for small or medium-sized business. And so what our offer to the stations was, hey, we're going to teach your sales reps how to use this book to go get more customers. And we had 867 stations participate in that offer. And we launched the book to number 3 on the New York Times and number 1 on the Wall Street Journal bestsellers list.
That is scrappy. I love that, man. First of all, a couple of things I'll highlight there, just because I love to hear stories like this. Going from 18 homeless. Look, we were all like dumb kids at one point, right? Like I wasn't 18 and homeless, but I was making dumb decisions at 18 to 21 years old. So I understand that. But to be able to pull it together that young, first of all, is pretty, I would say, impressive. Like a lot of my friends that sort of hit the skids between 18 and 25. It kind of took them till they're like, 30 before they started to kind of get it together. So good on you. What do you attribute that to? Was there some like light bulb moment where you're like, I got to get my shit together, or how'd it work?
A couple things. One, I chose to be there, right? I wasn't there because I was an addict myself. I wasn't there because my home life was so horrible. I actually went up there to be with a girl, right? So I chose to be there. And while there is some level of glamour of living under a bridge with a bunch of kids and doing drugs and selling drugs, it doesn't take very long before you're like, yeah, this is not really for me.
Yeah, the shine wears off. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, now I went home. So I benefited from the fact that I didn't have to be there, and I had a safe home to be able to go to, and I took advantage of that. The other is, this is normally something I share at the end of interviews and calls and with folks. But Roy, who's my first best-selling author, he's also my mentor, and we co-authored a book titled Pendulum: How Past Generations Shape Our Present and Predict Our Future together as well. But about 20 years ago now, we were in New York, walking the streets after Book Expo America. Book Expo America used to be the largest book industry trade convention in the world. It's been discontinued since COVID, probably not going to come back. But anyway, we were walking the streets after Book Expo, Roy said to me, Michael, the winners and losers in life are determined when the teams are picked. There are two teams that are essential for your success. The first are those that select you to be on their team. The second are those you select to be on your team. And when I came home, I positioned myself to be able to be picked by the right people to be on their team. So first, this magazine editor and owner, then Ray Bard, then Roy Williams, then Ivan Misner, and others. And I spent the first 10 years of my career just being a servant and in service and learning from all of those people. And while I don't have a technically formal education, likely my actual education level would be the equivalent of a master's or doctorate degree from Harvard, based on the information that I've been able to learn from the heads of industry. That's the benefit, is that these are heads of industry in different categories, and I got to learn from all of them.
Yeah, I know. I think there's a ton to that, Michael. Like a couple of things I'll highlight there. Again, just zoning in. Like, when you told that story about just calling up the New York Times, Washington Post, asking how do I make your book list, that is like, there's a switch here in people's journey from I'll call it like non-entrepreneur to entrepreneur, and it's a moment like that is where you start to define it, because you're overcoming this like fear that the world tells you don't just call high level people and ask them things. Like, you don't do that. There's a certain rule set you're supposed to follow, a chain of command you're supposed to operate under, yeah. Right? And to throw that out and just be like, I'm just gonna try it, and like see what happens, is such a great beginner's mindset. And it really kind of speaks to this. It reminds me of a story. I just was talking to another entrepreneur a couple weeks ago, and he was like telling me about how he wants to develop his skills and do some things. And I was like, well, what's holding you back? And he's just like, I'm afraid that my friends will judge me if I'm, not working a real job where I make money and provide for my family. I'm like, yeah, you got to get over that, dude, because that's how it all starts. Like that fear of judgment holds us back.
It is the number one reason why small businesses fail, because their family doesn't support them. They don't understand. The system is so ingrained into people that they expect that a job creates security, and when you eliminate that and you create doubt, it creates fear, right? Whereas someone who has my mindset, or a normal entrepreneur, we don't view the world in the same through the same lens that everybody else does. Most of us have trauma in our past, either big T or little t trauma, and many of us have some form of learning disability, including dyslexia and others. I actually was diagnosed when I was a kid with 26 learning disabilities and a couple of different forms of dyslexia. And so when you have both trauma and then you have learning disabilities, you can either give up or you can find a way to be able to thrive, right? It's thrive or die. And entrepreneurs, we choose to thrive. And so we leverage our disabilities to our advantage. The definition of crazy is the aberration from the norm, like the average, right? So crazy is when you are on the wrong side of the norm. And so what I look for in my clients, and excuse my language here, you can edit this out if you want, but we look for folks that are batshit crazy. And the reason for that is that simply being crazy, looking at the world slightly different, is normally insufficient to be able to solve most problems. Most problems are solved from entirely unique angles and perspectives that the masses aren't able to see. And even in business, there's something called business topology. Business topology talks about how if you have an industry-wide problem, the solution is never found in the industry. You have to look for another industry that had similar problems, look at what their solution was, and then apply that solution within your industry. And so you have to be able to look at the world in a different, through a different lens, through a different perspective, and be able to see broader things than the average person would.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing you mentioned, just rewinding a tiny bit, is that you thought to yourself, and I'm going to use my own words, but I've got to surround myself with people who are like the leaders in my space, or the people who know the things that I want to know someday, right? And that's how you essentially, I'm going to give you this language, you didn't say this, but taught yourself a PhD worth of knowledge, which I agree, like totally with you. I'm 100% the same way. And I did the same thing like the first 10 years of my career. We're working as the first employee at a couple startups because I knew I wanted to start my own company someday. How do I see what it's like? Just go in there with some founders who I think are smart and I can learn from. And I think that's something that, again, a lot of entrepreneurs who don't make it, maybe don't have the humility to do that sometimes. And maybe it's a fear thing again too. Like you don't want to be the little fish in this big pond or something. I don't know, but like that's also something I really appreciate that you had that insight so early in your career because a lot of people don't get that, I think.
It's interesting. I come from a theological background where we believe in serving and in personal accountability. But beyond that, I believe, to the best of my ability, that I should try to learn from others. Right. That folks that have spent time, effort, energy becoming experts are experts for a reason, and that they're going to definitionally know more than me in those areas. Um, One of the books that, if your audience hasn't read it, that I would strongly advise reading is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. In that book, he actually describes that he did something even more extreme than what I did. And he went and worked for, I believe it was Henry Ford, for 10 years, making nothing, literally making nothing, just being in the service of Henry Ford. But the outcome of that, maybe it was Edison, it was either Edison or Ford. The outcome of that was that he had learned all of these business secrets and tools and how things ran. He had met the heads of industry and developed a relationship with them, so that when he then set out on his own, he had the relationship and intellectual capital that he needed to be able to build what he built out. And that's one of the important things. Entrepreneurship, by definition, is focused on business, and the belief is that money is the lifeblood of business. But the reality is that my friend Garrett Gunderson wrote a book titled Killing Sacred Cows, and he says that there are three kinds of capital in the world: intellectual capital, relationship capital, and financial capital. Financial capital really can't buy intellectual capital or relationship capital, but if you have no financial capital, but you have relationship capital and intellectual capital, that will always result in financial capital.
I love that. That is a great one. I know that we're here to talk about book retreat at some point, so let's get into that. I love to get off on these the fear stuff and the story stuff because it is, to me, that is the real hard part of entrepreneurship. I think tactics you can read books on and like whatever, but once you've got to get yourself in the mindset of entrepreneurs. So I appreciate you sharing that, and we'll come back to some of that. But let's talk about what book retreat does, because I was just saying before the show, I've thought it's on my bucket list. I want to write a book someday, right? And I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs have the same, bug inside of us that's like, we want to speak, we want to lead, we want to produce our vision in a way that's tangible to others. Give me a little more of the background on Book Retreat and how you got it started, and then what you guys do for clients now.
One of the books I worked on a number of years ago was a book titled Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. It was a huge book back in the day. And a couple of years after we ran that campaign, I was meeting with T. Harv, and he said to me, Michael, you do really great work for folks like me who have existing businesses and platforms. And he said, that's really amazing, and you should keep doing that. But he said, there are a lot of people who have stories and a voice they want to share who can't afford to run these types of campaigns. You should, if you really want to be able to make a difference in the world, yes, keep working with us, but find a way to be able to work with the other folks that aren't at our levels. And I took that to heart. And so what I started developing back then, which has morphed into the book retreat, is a book outlining process. And I want to remind the audience that I suffer from 26 learning disabilities, including more than one form of learning of dyslexia. And reading and writing actually is difficult for me. It takes a lot of extra work and mental power to be able to do those things. The audience may or may not know, even in this conversation, I have a really bad stutter that I spent years in therapy working on. And all of these things take up a lot of mental space and energy for me when I'm engaging with someone. So what I did initially was developed an outlining process that worked around all of my learning disabilities. because writing is a really important part in my industry. Like, it's book publishing. Yeah, it's book marketing, but it's book publishing. And books have to, imagine this, they got to be written, right? So I have to be able to write, I have to be able to edit, I have to know what is good and what is bad, right? I have to be able to have a proficiency within that. Now, I will admit to the audience, I am not a natural writer because of the reasons stated. I am a proficient editor and writer trained from 27 years of work doing the same things repeatedly and learning and improving on the skill set. There are people who have natural abilities to write. They are writers. I am not a writer. So I created an outlining process for myself that allowed me to be able to extract my ideas from my mind, from my broken mind, into an organized fashion that allowed me to be able to get that out and then to be told. The reality is that most people aren't writers, right? Writing is a very specific skill set, just like being a musician is a skill set, or being a sculptor is a skill. Like, it's a very specific talent that some people have. We commonly refer to it as a form of right brain pattern recognition, specifically at the use of words in creating mental images, right? And so most of us don't have that, but we all have stories and experiences. I mentioned Garrett Gunderson earlier. He wrote a book titled Killing Sacred Cows. And one of the things that I learned from Garrett when I began working with him, and again, he's a financial wealth expert. He does family practices, which is for the wealthy. But he taught this value to me called soul purpose, SOUL purpose. And Garrett believes that each one of us are given a soul purpose in the service of our fellow man, and that soul purpose expresses itself through our talent, skills, abilities, the things that we're naturally attracted to. But all of those things are given to us not for us. They're given to us for our serving other people. So my experiences that I have are not for me, they're for you. They're for your audience, they're for everyone else. And I believe that everyone in your audience has those same experiences and stories, not the same experiences and stories, but they have experiences and stories that they were given as gifts to be able to experience and to be able to share with other people. And so the the idea of writing a book doesn't require that you be a good writer. Hemingway said there's no such thing as a good writer, only a good editor. So really what most of us need to do is be able to get our ideas out in out of our right hemisphere of the brain, filtered through the left hemisphere of the brain, down onto paper in an organized capacity, so that we can tell the story and then allow the editor to do their wordsmithing brilliance, right? And so the process was developed initially to help me write books, and we've been applying that with our clients ever since. And we've refined and honed that outlining process to the extent where we are able to birth the book retreat. Now, we have clients that hire us to go through this process and then take the outline that we create with them and ghostwrite the book. We have clients that hire us to take that outline and then throw them into video studio for a week, where we use the outline to interview them to answer all of the details, and then we turn that into videos and podcasts and blog posts and social media posts, and of course the book itself. And both of those have costs. Ghostwriting is very expensive. Doing the video work is very expensive. And then there are folks who don't have a lot of money to be able to do that work, even though perhaps the video work may be a more ideal outcome for most. And so we set up the time frame for them to write and complete the book in 1 month. And so the promise of the retreat is we're going to take you through the outlining process in the first week that'll be so detailed that you'll know every chapter in the book. You'll know every topic within every chapter. You'll know the big idea, the story, the nuts and bolts, and the hope for every topic in every chapter. Once you've completed the logic, the thinking, the things that satisfy the left hemisphere of the brain, once that's down, the storytelling is easy. You know your experiences, you know your expertise, you know your story, so it's very easy to be able to tell. So for folks who are just starting out or who are new to platform building and thought leadership and influence, we offer the retreat as an opportunity to be able to get the outline done in 1 week and then to finish writing the book in the next 3 weeks. And so at the end of the retreat, our promise is my team will edit your book, will do the book cover and internal design. And we have several different hybrid publishers who have agreed to publish your book. So we have all of those things lined up to be able to make it a turnkey solution. And by the way, all of it is still reflective of the voice of the attendee of the retreat, because the outlining process is taking what your right hemisphere knows to be true. And I have a saying that we use that I trust your right hemisphere for creativity more than I trust your left hemisphere. The left hemisphere of the brain is designed for protection, right? It's the visceral experience that we have. We see each other, we hear each other, we can touch and smell things because of our left hemisphere of the brain. The universe is bombarding us with an infinite amount of rays and data that the human mind is not designed to process. So the left hemisphere actually filters out non-essential information so that we're left with the things that are most essential. The right hemisphere of the brain, it's about pattern recognition. There is no morality in the right hemisphere. There's no right or wrong. There is no good or bad. There is no you should do it this way or that way. No, it's pattern recognition. It sees all the details and it pieces them together. So I trust the right hemisphere as it pertains to being able to see the thing that you should be writing. And so we trust that. And then we use our model to semi-paralyze the left hemisphere of the brain in doing a very controlled brain dump that is so controlled that at the end of that brain dump, we've leveraged the right hemisphere's pattern recognition and we've created an exceptionally detailed outline.
So this is kind of why, sorry, just to break in, but this is something that people say often that I think it mirrors with this, and it's interesting. It's like that constraints breed creativity, and it's kind of what you're saying here. It's like having that outline sort of shuts down that part of your brain that's going to be like analyzing everything and lets you just flow between the bullet points almost, which feels like that's very easy. Like write about this one bullet point, and it's like a story in your life. And you're like, okay, great, I'll just tell the story of my life. Like that's a easy thing to do. But if you tell me write a whole book, like I'm like, oh shit, where do I start?
Yeah, the story that I use at the retreat that we start off with is when I was 11, I used to deliver a local paper to the University of BYU, Brigham Young University, and to the college students there. And I met a track star at BYU. His name was Soa Marley. He was a prince from a tribe in Ghana. And we became friends. And in 91, he invited me over, I believe it was 91, maybe it was 92, but he invited me over to his home to watch a American football bowl game between BYU and Texas A&M. And at the beginning of the game, I walked into his home and he had a big giant metal bowl of popcorn. And he asked me, he said, how long do you think it'll take you to eat the whole bowl of popcorn? I'm like, there's no way I'm eating the whole bowl of popcorn, right? But lo and behold, by the end of the game, the bowl of popcorn was empty. And he said, well, I thought you couldn't eat it. How do you do that? I said, I have no idea how he did it. He said, I'll tell you how you did it. You did it one kernel at a time.
Right.
People talk about the analogy of eating an elephant one bite at a time, but I think that the idea of kernel-sized bites is more relevant.
Yeah,
here.
Popcorn's more relevant. I'm not going to eat an elephant anytime soon.
So the idea that in writing a book is the same thing. Yes, we have some big picture things that we need to put together and organize, but we should be writing it once organized by the one kernel at a time, one bite at a time. And then an editor can go back and edit those things together and make them flesh together. The idea is we want to get your experiences out into paper. The idea of doing eating one kernel at a time is the model that we follow in the retreat. So after the outline is done at the end of the first week, we go through every chapter and every topic, one part of the topic at a time. What's the big idea? Now let's flesh that out. Now we know what the story is. Now tell the story. Write out the story. It doesn't have to be well written. It just needs to be told. Now tell me what you learned and how others can apply it. What's the nuts and bolts? Now tell me, if I apply what you learned in my own life, what outcome will I get? What is the hope of the application of this learning? And so you just do that one bit at a time, one bite at a time, and you go from one topic to the next to the next, to the next, and at the end of the month, the entire thing is done. Now, most of my clients and folks that attend that retreat, they're thought leaders or influencers at some level. Most of them don't own brick and mortar stores. They own businesses that allow them to manage what they're doing virtually. And though we're doing Guatemala at Lake Atitlan, which is very remote, there's amazing internet and cell reception down there. So the value of being in that setting for a month is that you could manage your business, but all of the other day-to-day distractions that we have are all gone, right? Family, kids, dinners, events, friends, whatever else, all of those distractions are eliminated. So you can focus on work and you can focus on the writing of the book. I actually, when we run the retreats, I not only write a book every time myself, but in managing my business, I usually get 3 months of work done during that same time frame because I don't have any of the distractions that I would have in my home life.
That's huge. That's a really cool model and way to do this, Michael. How this is something else that kind of you talk about on the website some, and so I'm going to kind of like pull some of this. But I think you guys have published 100 plus like New York Times bestsellers. You've done 55 million plus, like books sold. So like clearly there's a lot of volume of books being sold because of your work. How much of that comes down to who the writers are and the strength of the writing and editing versus the marketing? And like, what's I don't know, how much time do you spend on either of those? You spend a month writing it. Like, do you spend a month and 10 months marketing? Like, I don't know how that works.
Marketing has a couple of different elements to it. The average book last year didn't sell 500 copies that was published, right? If you eliminate all small press and self-published books and you leave just the New York houses and their imprints, the average book by the New York houses didn't sell 800 copies, right? The self-published books last year on average sold less than $100. So what we have to look at is what allows a book to become culturally well known at the highest level. So in order to get there, everybody talks about word of mouth. Well, what is word of mouth? It's when you have a bunch of people talking about a product or service or event or person in a state of either love or hate. A truism in marketing communication is to the extent that you delight one person, you will equally offend someone else. So if your content isn't offending anyone, it's also not delighting anyone, right? So the quality of the content in that capacity is important. It has to delight and offend people all at the same time. But then there's the mechanism of having enough people talking about your book for it to have a noticeable impact. And so before word of mouth picks up, you have to hit critical mass. Critical mass occurs when you get 500,000 books sold. At that point, if people love or hate your book, then you have a genuine opportunity where enough people are talking about the book to where you can sell 1 million copies or more. Now, if you sell 500,000 books and people are apathetic, then you're gonna be stuck at where you're at. The idea then is the objective then of the author is to be able to figure out how to go from selling 0 books to 500,000 books. And that responsibility, that marketing responsibility, is exclusively on the shoulders of the author. And so the quality of the book is absolutely important as it pertains to the ability to hit critical mass and then create word of mouth based on that. It's also important, like there are a lot of books that we work on that I would define as well books. So when I say well, I mean the place that you go to get water out of. It's deep with water, but it's not very wide. And I call them well markets because the felt need of the audience is very deep, right? You pick leadership, sales, or advertising, or like there's a lot of niche categories where the audience is small, but the felt need is deep. And so those types of books likely will never hit critical mass. And therefore that's not a high probability. That doesn't mean though that they can't have the niche impact that they're looking for. And the niche impact again is also based on the quality of the book. It's simply setting the expectation of what is reasonable or possible with a given title.
If you write one of these well books, which I like that term, because I would, if I were to write one, that's probably what it would be. It'd be to my like tiny little sliver of knowledge that I have a lot of depth in, and that's my audience too. So, but if you write one of these, do you still need to polarize people in that same way, or can it be like? I mean, I feel like it needs to have something unique that stands out at least.
Again, to the extent that you delight someone, you're going to offend somebody else. Polarization happens because of bias. Everybody has a position. There are people in your space who have a philosophy that you disagree with, that you look at entrepreneurship differently, and vice versa. And that's okay. In fact, that is to be lauded and applauded. Right? We should be supporting that we have different ways to be able to get to the end result. As the saying goes, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to be an entrepreneur. There's more than one way to build a business. There's not a catch-all. Now, you might have a model for building a business that works all of the time, and that's what you promote because that's what you know, and you're fine with it. Someone else might have an entirely different model that they've proven works when applied 100% of the time. The objective for consumers is then, from a platform standpoint, to find folks who they resonate with and that align with their values and their perspective, right? And that's where the engagement comes in, and that's where the quality of the content comes in. So, yeah, I think that necessarily, if you're not in opposition to somebody else, either you're so new that people don't really know, or you're not saying something unique enough that people are going to be able to say this is the solution.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So what's your role day to day at Book Retreat? Do you mostly do the sales and kind of building up client awareness and building up prospects and clients, or is it more in the overall management? Like, where do you typically spend your day?
There's a couple of different capacities, right? We run bestseller campaigns, as you put out before. We've run 131 New York Times campaigns and mid-list every time. When I run those campaigns at that level, I manage those projects, because you're talking about projects where the clients are spending $500,000 to $2.5 million in marketing cost and relationship capital, intellectual capital, right?
Yeah, I imagine all your personal like connections and knowledge of that space just is hard, probably impossible to replicate. Like one to one. Like, yeah, okay.
I could train somebody, but even if I did train somebody to do exactly the same thing, the trust isn't there, because I've spent years doing this. So at that level, they want me involved. So I'm absolutely managing those projects. As it pertains to the roles and responsibilities with Book Retreat, my main goal when we're not doing the retreat is the marketing of it. Right. Certainly, we set up the intake model, and we have a very clear set of things that we do before the retreat to make sure people are taken care of. All of that's already operationalized and systematized. So we've got that in place. So we're not running a retreat; it's day to day. When I do the retreat, I'm running the retreat. I have people who certainly do other parts that are managing and moving people, but in terms of being the day to day
facilitator, yeah.
Facilitator, that's coming from me for the same reason. People are trusting me. I have a great proven model. Somebody else could, and people do actually apply my outline process without me. It's not that it's not possible, but if you're going to spend a month with me in Guatemala and spend 20 grand to plus the cost to fly down there, yeah, you want me. So I'm there daily. Now the thing about it is that the majority of the work for me is the first week. It's the outlining, helping folks get through that. Once it's done, it's an occasional question, right? Because the model is so clear that there isn't a lot of room for question or ambiguity, right? And so sometimes there will be a complex topic we're talking about, and do we split it or whatever? But for the most part, after the first week, I'm answering a few questions a day and making myself available. And so what ends up happening is we're in a space, and I'm there working, waiting for people to ask me questions.
Yeah, I love this model, and I'm just going to kind of like provide commentary on what you said here, and I'm kind of reading between the lines, so correct me how I'm probably missing some bits. But you've kind of got this service ladder that you've built, is what some people call it, where it's like the entry level is maybe some kind of lead magnet on your site or something like that, and then the next level up is go on a book retreat, and that's going to get you in a room for $20K to like write a book, focus you kind of, and get some one-on-one time with you. And then there's this really high level of $500,000 that gets you like on the New York Times bestseller list. It's a one-on-one kind of like, we're going to really bespoke model, like really high touch, like not replicable at all, like super interesting. And I think that's a great way to build like a resilient model, because you obviously you're going to get a couple of these big whale clients a year, or 10 a year, whatever your number is, doesn't matter. But like you have some fixed number, you can't get 100 of them because it's just not possible for you to scale your time that way. But you can get 100 people in a writer's retreat conceivably, or 200 people in a writer's retreat. I don't know how many are in there, but like either way, I could see how that could scale a little better. So it's a really cool way you've built that. So either way, I mean, the numbers like make it so that you can have like a good business that isn't reliant on just one service stream, which is great. How do you feel about it being so reliant on you though, Michael? This is kind of like owner to owner. I'm always scared of that, right?
So we do this with our clients too in building platforms, right? The books are really a segue into platform building, and that's really what we do, is build platforms. You always have to start with the purveyor of the idea. You have to build it from there, and then you can train other people to slowly replace you in doing it. So there are people who attend the retreat that are supporting me, who I'm slowly having take over doing different parts of the work. We've been recording in video the work that we do to be able to prep people and to meet the other facilitators in advance. And so, to a degree, while I'm alive and able, I'll be engaged in some capacity. But in terms of doing a lot of the work, I mean, I could foresee in the future coming down for the first day and then coming back the last week for graduation and the completion, and letting the having the retreat run itself, right? I very, very much see that as a reasonable possibility. The other thing that I'm working on is automating the process within technology. And when that technology is built, then the trust goes into that technology more than to me as an individual. And then also scale is very easy at that point as well. So we have to recognize that the authority was built by the individual, in this case, me, or in your case, you. And we have to leverage off of that. But the objective is to be able to slowly move it to other people facilitating, right? At the Covey Leadership Center, which is not Franklin Covey, Stephen R. Covey was the founder, and he was the face of it. But within 20 years of his business, they had trained facilitators that were going out and doing the work. Was he the face of the organization? Yes. Did he do interviews? Yes. Did he do events? Yes. Did he occasionally work with a top CEO of a major 100 company? Absolutely. But he didn't have to do those things. They were just an extension of maintaining the name and reputation that he had built.
I think that's a really good insight, is that because again, this is kind of speaking to my personal fear, is like, I don't want the business to rely on me too much, but there's a huge amount of leverage that the business can get from a few minutes, hours, whatever, of my time and my personal relationship kind of coming in here and there in certain times. I've seen that personally, but it sounds like you're seeing the same thing. You're kind of seeing like, okay, fine, today it relies on me X percentage, but in the future, I can see a path to getting it down to like 1% me and 99% other people, or 0% you, as you move towards wanting to retire someday, I assume.
Two things to note. One is the entrepreneur's business a lifestyle business, meaning they do it because they enjoy the lifestyle from it, or is it an actual business? If it's a lifestyle business, you'll never extricate yourself from that. If you are building a real business, you must extricate yourself from that. One of the clients that I mentioned earlier was Roy H. Williams, and after we put him on the New York Times with 3 consecutive books, we sat down and discussed how to be able to create a legacy around that, how to be able to allow his ideas and training and work to survive beyond him. And so the research that Roy did, that we discovered, is that in order for an idea to survive the creator or purveyor of that idea, that they have to turn that over to others more than 15 years before their death. So what Roy did as part of that is he created a nonprofit business communication school in Austin, Texas, called the Wizard Academy. And as of 2018, I believe it was, he had removed himself from the board of the academy. There's a chancellor of the academy that is not Roy, and all of the ideas that he had created are now being taught by other people, with that exact purpose of being able to ensure that his teachings survive beyond him.
That's really good. This is funny that you say all this. I'm listening right now to a podcast called History of Rome. I've listened to it a couple times before. I love it. It's a 200 part history of ancient Rome up till like the breakup of the Roman Empire. Anyway, one of the takeaways from it is exactly this, which is when the emperors started to take over, Caesar, Julius Caesar, Caesar Augustus, etc. The ones that did best were the ones who had many years of sort of direct tutelage and sort of mentorship from the previous emperor. The ones who did worst tended to be the ones who came in as children, had no background in ruling an empire, no parent to oversee them and tell them how to do this, no time in the military to actually understand what they were leading and how this was going to work. Like it's just almost one to one. Like the worst ones, the Caligulas, the Neros, that they all came in way too young without any experience and any mentorship. They came in like just wild. And I think you see that again, like your point is like on if there's a big vision, if there's a big legacy you want to leave, you have to spend some time imprinting it onto others. You can't just like build it all internally to yourself and make it all rely on you and then just drop dead one day and have it carry on. It's not going to work.
It goes back to my statement earlier about sole purpose, which is we're here to serve each other. And so if you don't share it with others, if you don't write your book, if you don't do your interviews, if you don't do your content creation, you're robbing yourself of the sole purpose that you were given, and you're robbing the rest of society.
I love it. That's a good call to action to also go do a book retreat. I mean, in all seriousness, Michael, I think a lot of people get stuck on the blank page problem of, oh, write a book. Oh, well, where do I start? Where do I get, how do I actually get these ideas extricated? What story am I even trying to tell maybe? And then for others, it's just making that space to go do it, which I think book retreat, again, that makes sense that would solve it. I've had similar experiences doing like team retreats where we block off, you block off a week and you say, we are going to focus on these problems and think about them, and you get so much done. You're just like always coming back from that recharged and really jazzed about like the progress you can make. So I think it's an interesting model. Michael, one last question that I always like to ask people, because and I know that like you've mentioned some books already, so there's probably a few that are worthwhile here. What's something you've been reading in the last year or two that have kind of shaped you as an entrepreneur or has impacted you a lot?
Interestingly enough, I'm working on a New York Times campaign launch for the July 25. It's by a gentleman by the name of Carl Barney. He's written a book titled The Happiness Experiment. And he tells a story where he gets to the point where he has a near-death experience after selling his company for a lot of money, like $1 billion or whatever that was. And he had just finished creating his will for his family and friends before this plane crash almost happened. And as the plane was crashing down, like he was going straight nosedive to the ground, he was just thinking about at least everybody taken care of. When the plane didn't crash, miraculously didn't crash, he realized that he didn't want to wait till he was dead to benefit the people that were in his will. Right? Like he wanted to see the benefit of that giving while he was alive. And so he's come up with this concept that he calls prequesting. In a will, you bequeath something to somebody, which means that you're saying, hey, when I die, you get this thing. Well, he wants to prequest. He wants to give, what he's doing is he's not buying boats and planes and jets and more houses. He's got a few houses, but his value is in people. And so what he's doing is he's, with intent, giving away the wealth that he would give with his death to the people that are living that impacted his life. Now, he's not doing it in a way that would create the lottery effect with people, which is that they don't know how to spend money. Instead, he'll identify what their needs are, and he'll go and solve those needs. So as an example, he had a brother-in-law that had cancer, and the insurance wasn't covering the treatment, so he covered all the treatment. He has hired a lot of business coaches, life coaches, and workout coaches, dietitians, and others for family, friends, and employees. In fact, he bought me an Aura ring as a thank you. Aura it tracks my health. He prequested that to me for the work that I've been doing with and for him. So his concept is to give to the people in your lives that have made a difference, whether they understood it or not, whether they're wealthy or not, and to be based on your own ability to give to those people the unconditional thank you. And so it's a really fun book that I've been working on. I'm really quite excited about it.
That's really cool. That sounds like right up my alley. I just read a book about a year and a half ago that was a life changer for me called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. It's been around. I mean, it's not like a new book or anything, but it hit me at this time in my life where my parents are getting older. My some of my parents' friends are dying, and people that were in that generation, and I'm starting to see it more. And what struck me, one of the regrets is kind of right here. It's like I wish I had told people how I felt about them, like in my life, instead of kind of waiting till the deathbed experience to try to like make time for that. And it's that same idea. It's telling people or acting on those feelings or whatever it is. Like you can tell people in lots of ways. It could be through money if that's what you have. It could be through the actual just saying the words. It could be both. But I think that's a really good point. It's like, don't wait until you're at their life's end to like give people those things that would really make an impact on them, especially when it's timely, like, somebody getting healthy today or paying for treatments today is worth way more than you giving them $1 million when you die. Like, what are they going to do with it then?
They get money that you don't get to see the benefit of, and then they may or may not be able to apply in a way that is of value to them. They may suffer from the lottery effect, right? Like, there's all sorts of things that go into that. But if you are intentional, like, hey, you have this need, I'm going to solve that need for you. I'm going to help you out because I care about you and I'm so grateful for what you've given. It's an entirely different experience. And so I think going back to the concept of sole purpose, for me, that's really the focus is we're here for each other. Let's give and continue to give for each other. Yes, one of the forms of currency we exchange is money, right? That is a currency, but it's not the only one, and it often isn't the most important one. That doesn't mean don't value yourself. Money is a form of value, but it means to note what your worth is and to be able to share that with others in a way that is meaningful.
Yeah. Michael, thank you so much for doing this. This has been really, really fun. And I've learned a ton of just the book process and writing and publishing and promoting and all this, as well as a lot of insight into your career path here. Where can people follow up with you or Book Retreat? Where do we learn more?
I try to keep things simple. So bookretreat.com, BOOKRETREAT.com, bookretreat.com. They can email me at michael@promoteabook.com, PROMOTEABOOK.com. Promoteabook.com is a website they can go to. It's my bestseller website where we talk about those services on the high end. But for most folks, Book Retreat has everything that they'll want.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the time again, Michael. We'll stay in touch. And everyone, thank you for listening.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for watching this episode of Retain Trust. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube. It takes 2 seconds and it helps others find out about the show. And if you have questions or suggestions for a future episode, leave a comment. See you next time.